Well, good morning. Glad to be with you this week. You probably have noticed that you are receiving this from the dining room in the Gibson household, and we welcome you in. Today, we're going to talk about God's grace. Excuse me. Paul, when writing to the church at Corinth in 1 Corinthians 15:10, he said, "By the grace of God, I am what I am." And we're going to talk about Paul a little bit further here in just a minute, but that's a wonderful, wonderful statement that he was able to make because think about who Paul what happened when Paul was saved by God. He saved his soul. God disciplined his mind. He enriched his life, made his life so much better. He empowered his ministry and he sustained him all the way to the end. And that's what every one of us should be looking forward to, for God's grace just to wrap itself around us and keep us, not only bring us to salvation, but also keep us focused and keep us in the middle of God's will for our lives. And when we'll do that, we will be so much better off. I think you know what I mean. But Paul, that's why he could say, because of the grace of God, that's why I am what I am. So what has grace done for you lately? Well, we're going to talk about a few of those things just briefly here. First of all, you were saved by grace. 1 John 4:19 says, God loved us first. He first loved us. And so he loved us, and that's why he sent Jesus to pay the penalty for our sin. Uh, Christianity was initiated by God. And of course, Paul's writing to the church at Ephesus there in Ephesians 2:8, for by grace are you saved, and that not of yourself. So grace saves us from the ravages of Satan, from an eternity in a devil's hell. And think about this. You didn't, and I didn't deserve God's grace, God's salvation. And we can't save ourselves. Even in the Old Testament, people weren't saved by their works. They were saved by God's grace. Amos, in Amos 5:15, he urged his people to repent, to walk in the Lord, walk the right way with the hope that the Lord, the God of hosts, would be gracious. And so even in the Old Testament, grace was abounding for people who followed the Lord. So who was Paul? Well, Paul was a blasphemer. He was a persecutor. He was a destroyer of churches. But he became an apostle. He became an apostle. Think about that. He was an apostle to the Gentiles. And as such, golly, excuse me, he became a missionary, a statesman. He founded churches. He was a soul winner, and he was a Christian martyr, willingly gave his life for the sake of the gospel. And all that happened by the grace of God. Well, secondly, think about this. We are, as Christians, disciplined by the grace of God. Well, you think, well, I don't like discipline. Discipline's not a good thing. It is if you're a Christian. Discipline is a good thing if you're a Christian because God disciplines his believers to keep us on the straight and narrow. You can't be a disciple without discipline. We can't be saved by discipline, but our salvation can't be effective unless we are disciplined in the things of God. There's no conflict between grace and discipline. Let me share with you for just a minute here out of Titus chapter 2, if I can get back over here and find it. Titus chapter 2, verse 11 and 12. Let me read this for you because it talks about the how grace and discipline work together. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in the present age. Those are our instructions. Those are our marching orders to live godly lives while we're here on this earth. So we're saved by the grace of God. We are disciplined by the grace of God because He does love us, because He does want us to be able to fulfill the role that He has for us on this earth. Unfortunately, a lot of people today, even believers, don't like being disciplined by God. They don't look at it from the standpoint of, well, there's something wrong with my life that God's trying to show me I need to change. No, they look at it from the standpoint of God's beating up on me. Well, that's not the way you need to look at it. Next, we think about this. We are enriched by the grace of God. The grace of God makes our lives so much better. If we take His gifts willingly and use them how He would have us to use them, then we're going to belong to Him forever, be drawn close to Him forever. And His grace isn't cheap, but by the same token, He willingly gave Jesus to us. And so we are enriched. Everything that you get when you become a Christian is a gift of God to enrich your life, make your life better. And the question is, would you have it any other way? I wouldn't. I want the very best God's got for Ken Gibson. And I hope you want that very same thing for yourself. We're empowered by the grace of God. 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7 and verse 9. Let me get back over here if I can find that. And this is a new Bible, so it's taken me a little bit of time to find some of these things. So just bear with me. I'll tell you what. We won't read that because I couldn't find it quickly enough, but we'll just tell you what it is. That's where Paul is given, he said he had been given a thorn in the flesh. He called it a messenger from Satan to buffet him, and he prayed for God to remove that thorn from him. But God's answer was no. The way God answered him was, he said, Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. So Paul understood then that he needed to live in God's grace and not worry about that thorn. God would take care of it. Y'all may remember an author named Robert Louis Stevenson. Let me read this to you here. He wrote a story one time called The Ebb Tide. And in it, one of the characters cries out, everything's grace. We walk upon it. We breathe it. We live and die by it. It makes the nails and axles of this universe. I think that's really true. I think that's really true because of God's grace. We can say along with Paul, by the grace of God, we are who we are. And He's going before us, making our path clear and sustaining us when we hit bumps in the road and those kind of things. But His grace is everything we need. And it's everything that makes this world and us as Christians function the way we should function. And finally, we're sustained by the grace of God. When we do hit those rough bumps in the road, He keeps us. He gives us strength for the day. He sustains us in our trials and our tribulations and pitfalls. He keeps us from falling. Some people think that God saves us by His grace, and then after we're saved, He just kind of takes His hand off of us and says, okay, you're saved now, you're good to go. You can just go ahead and go out there and do what you want to. And I'm just going to take my hands off and let you go ahead and deal with your life on your own. No, He doesn't do that. He keeps us in His hands, and He protects us, and He loves us, and He will guide us, give us direction in our lives if we allow Him to do it. That's the issue. So many don't. So many don't want God to do that. It takes God's grace to save us from our sin and to keep us from the clutches of Satan, that Satan wants to destroy us. Martin Niemöller, I guess I'm pronouncing that right, Niemoeller, Martin Niemöller, he was a prisoner of Hitler during World War II. While he was in captivity, he wrote a letter to a friend of his. And in it he said, in the old days, I used to be a bearer of the gospel. Now that gospel is bearing me. The gospel of Christ was sustaining him during those dark days of his captivity with Hitler. And here's a wonderful thing. These gifts that we receive from God by His grace, once we become believers, these we've talked about today, just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more, so many more. Matter of fact, there's so many that John wrote in his gospel in John 21:25. He says, even the world itself could not contain the books that should be written. He said that concerning everything that Jesus did and that Jesus said. No matter how many books people write, they'll never get it all. That's how amazing our God is. Well, I hope you are walking in God's grace today. I hope that things are going well for you. And we look forward to seeing you this coming Lord's Day, Sunday school at 9:45, morning worship at 11 o'clock. Don't forget now, we've got a couple of things coming up. We have 1890s Festival on November the 6th. We'll be there at 6 o'clock in the morning to start parking cars like normal. And we need everybody, all hands on deck, as we used to say in the Navy, to be there to help out. And then coming up on, can't remember exactly the date, November the 14th, I believe it is. That's the last day to get your shoe boxes into the church for Operation Christmas Child. So if you need somebody to pick your shoebox up, let us know. We'll get somebody to come by and bring those, pick them up for you and bring them to the church so we can get them distributed to where we need to take them. Those things are coming up. And then toward the end of November, of course, there's the Thanksgiving worship service at McIntosh United Methodist Church. They're going to have lunch there. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, they're going to have a Thanksgiving lunch there at their church. Anybody can come. And then that evening, we'll have the community Thanksgiving service at United Methodist Church here in McIntosh as well. So put those things on your calendar, look forward to them, and participate as you can. And just remember to keep walking in the Lord. Keep walking in the Lord. We love you, and God bless.